All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Grow Rogue podcast. I'm really excited to have today's guest on. Cam Phillips has been one of the most inspirational just figures that I have been following for years. And also, Cam and I go way back. Cam was my point guard in college. Cam's a great friend and an even better person. So, Cam, thanks for joining me today, man.
I appreciate you having me.
All right, so I know a lot about your background, probably as much or more than anybody that is following you or is kind of in your ecosystem from a social media standpoint. But I think it's one of the most fascinating stories. Do you mind giving us a little bit of that background of, from college to your first career to what you're doing now?
For sure. So, like you said, went to college together, played ball, went to Emory University in Atlanta, and ended up majoring in economics. So when I entered college, no idea what I wanted to do except for make money. So once I graduated, ended up getting some pretty solid jobs with some investing companies, some banking companies, kind of did the corporate route for about 8 years. And eventually got to a point to where I hit all the milestones you could hit by your mid-20s, making a lot of money, all of that. But honestly, I was just unfulfilled. Got to the place to where I thought I had everything I wanted and it just didn't feel right. I was also dealing with a lot of mental struggles, going through ups and downs, figuring out if this was my path, and eventually got to the point to where I chose to just walk away from the finance life and having no idea what I wanted to do next. That really was just my first step in faith. And then doors started opening up. People thought my story was inspirational just from my upbringing to what I was doing now, and got asked to speak on a few stages, and eventually started coaching different individuals. Once I started coaching, doing workshops, I ended up writing a book called The Bigger Picture. I got the personal, relational, emotional growth, and that turned into a curriculum. So now I have a nonprofit called True Change, and we focus on personal development and career readiness for young adults. So the way that looks is we partner with different local governments, school districts, colleges, aligned nonprofits, and focus on building curriculums and programs for them. So pretty much just was able to use my tools and my gifts of communicating with different clients, taking a very complicated financial idea or investment idea, pitching that, having them trust me so they can grow their portfolio or grow whatever goals they have with their family, to kind of reframing that to say, all right, cool, you're working with a 16-year-old, 20-year-old, 24-year-old, and life seems overwhelming. And it's, how do I get there? But if you're able to break it down on a day-to-day basis, help them align what they're doing currently to what they want to do in the future, it makes that a lot cleaner.
All right. I really appreciate how you connect those two seemingly disparate career paths, right? It wasn't like those first 8 years or so was a complete waste. You clearly took some of those lessons and applied that to what you're doing now, albeit in a completely different, outcome driven, even though there actually may be some similar outcomes. So when you were going through that transition, did you say to yourself like, hey, I got these skills, I'm going to apply them in this way, or did it just kind of happen organically?
Yeah, it really happened organically. So part of it is the content, part of it is the programming, and then the other part is running the actual business. So when it comes with the content and programming, it's all right. Anytime you're working with people, they have to like and trust you before they'll do anything you say, right? In any industry. So when you're working with young adults, it's all right, cool. How can I articulate a message to where they relate to me? They find me authentic, and then from there, they trust me. The same thing I was doing with clients who may look different from me, who were a lot older. It's finding, all right, what connects us? How can I learn about them? And then any advice I give them, how it's going to benefit them and not just me. So taking how do you deliver a message and switching the audience. And then from the business side, I feel like that was a lot more strategic. I worked with a lot of business owners in the past, a lot of skill sets that you have when it comes with marketing, when it comes to outreach, when it comes to pitch decks, when it comes to how do I articulate why I'm a good fit for your organization, came from my previous experience. So going into that, not having as much as a learning curve, from the business standpoint, but having to figure out the different language and how to connect with different audiences.
So this is not an instance of like a guy that didn't know what he wanted to do and then found himself in something. You very definitely knew that I want to have an impact in the following way, but I don't know exactly how to apply that. Is that a fair way to encapsulate that?
Yeah, yeah. So even when I was in finance, working for a large company, got to the point to where it's like, all right, cool. I feel like I'm steady, making money, but I have a group of people who I care about, and me trying to find ways of impacting them. And at that point in time, it was investing in the social good causes, right? But it got to a point for me to where I wanted to be more hands on. It's all right, I'm making this impact from a distance. How can I make it more tangible? So, like you said, then figuring out, all right, what am I actually going to do? What unique skill set can I bring to do that?
Okay, and now kind of fast forwarding to today. So this is something I've really, I mean, weird to say, but I'm super proud of how you've done this, right? Because Cam and we were talking through this whole process. I mean, like I remember having conversations with you before you started at insert big bank name, right? And you know all the prep for that, right? And then the discussions we had in the middle of that, where I think you, maybe without even saying it, were probably starting to have that change of heart. And then I remember you told me when you were like, yeah, I left, like I'm done. It was like 2 weeks ago. All along the way, I felt like you had a good understanding of how to build a brand around what you were trying to do. You understood back when you were a financial advisor that, hey, I know I look, I'll say, call it what it is. Like I look different than the guys they're used to dealing with. You told me that, right? So I understand that I'm going to build this brand that is different and unique, and you've carried that through. Can you just talk to me about your thinking and the way that you applied that in across experiences and kind of what that's positioned you guys at True Change to do now?
Yeah. So I will give a lot of credit to you off the cuff. Like I remember one of the earliest conversations we had. I'm serious. One of the earliest conversations we had, you were talking about when you are building a brand, you're building essentially yourself. It's your personal brand, and you can go and create a company, you can go and do that. But what's most important is what brand have you built for yourself? And even me buying my domain name, that was advice that you gave me. It's like, hey, if you do anything today, one action step, go and buy your domain name. So as I embraced that advice, it was, all right, cool. What makes Cam unique? What do people say about Cam in rooms when he's not there? How am I showing up? And really figuring that out, owning that, and then knowing my tone and how to deliver that. So not necessarily looking at other speakers or facilitators and trying to copy them, but really getting comfortable with, all right, this is the Cam brand. So anywhere I walk into, whether you talk to people from 5 years ago in finance, those are the same thing about me now. So really tapping into, all right, who is Cam? And then once I was able to figure that out, it's getting other people's advice, but figuring out, all right, cool, like on the more minutia stuff, like what type of font do you want to use? What type of message you want to use? How do you want your videos to show up? Is it going to be more urban? Is it going to be more clean cut? How are you going to show up with what you're wearing? So just figuring out who I was, being comfortable with that, knowing that there was a market for it, not feeling like I had to alter myself or code switch, as some people would call, but really just owning that and being authentic. And people want to work with people who are authentic at the end of the day. So yeah, just figuring out who Cam really was and just embracing it.
I love that, and that's exactly what I observed from the outside, right? And you and I have some mutual friends who I would say these guys like Perry, right? Who I know from an outside perspective was telling me some of the same things, like, man, Cam's really figuring out like how to be him in a way that that promotes what he's trying to do. Cam, so I know you well enough to know. I mean, when you say that you're a man of few words, and being on camera was probably a little intimidating, and that's super common, right? Like you're not the first person to be uncomfortable on camera, but I think what you did that was a really smart play was you didn't just lock yourself in a room and face a camera and just start talking necessarily, right? There's a lot of different formats, right? You've got camera on you while you're doing a keynote. You've got camera on you. You got podcast clips. You've got camera on you in like, small group and even one-on-one conversations. So did that help you to kind of put yourself in a position where you're more comfortable and can put out content a little bit more seamlessly?
For sure, for sure. I mean, everything gets better with reps. So one of the most painful things is probably me watching that content after it's filmed. So it's me seeing, all right, where am I most comfortable? Where do I need to get more practice? How are people engaging with me when I'm in certain environments? So if it's a smaller group, if it's a keynote, like how can I make this interactive? And yep, doing the different types of content to really first off get comfortable speaking wherever, and also seeing, all right, what do I need to alter? What do I need to switch? What do I need to probably avoid at some times and say, hey, that's not the right fit for me. But yeah, doing the different types of content is extremely helpful.
So, I mean, so that is an immediately applicable bit of feedback there. Guys, if you're watching this, take that with you. There's only one way to get better, especially when it comes to content creation, and that is reps, right? Like you're not going to get it perfect the first time. The first few times are going to be terrible. I promise that's true, but you can't get past that until you do, right? You can't skip over that. Sean Purry talks about he said, in order to get to the mountaintop of cool, you have to go through the valley of cringe. And there's no way around it. You got to go through it. So yeah, then you can be strategic about it, and you can say, okay, look, in this format, I just don't feel comfortable. I don't come across as authentic as I do in this other format. So let's do less of that and more of this one. I think that's great. I think that's really good application there. Well, next, Cam, tell me, like, what are you guys doing right now in terms of growth? Because your organization has clearly grown, right? You've built out the board, you're applying for grants, you mentioned, and so you guys are doing some bigger and more impactful things. Tell us about that. Explain what you guys are doing to grow.
Yep. So a lot of it is, like you said, how do you scale effectively? So originally starting in Georgia, now also doing program in North Carolina, me being the face of the organization, obviously not being the only one who works with the organization. And how can we scale? How can we have a presence in both Georgia and North Carolina? And really, I was literally just meeting with somebody. It's creating those SOPs, those standard operating procedures, to where we can get the right people in place, delegate certain things in a timely manner, and they know how to deliver it the true change way. So when it comes to the tone, when it comes to posting, newsletters, emails, things like that, to where we can kind of offset more administrative tasks, giving them the tools that they need to succeed. A lot of it's finding the right people, which takes time. So finding the right people who fit your culture, who fit the work dynamics, and saying, all right, cool, bring them on. And then knowing it's going to feel like you're taking 2 steps back as you're training them to do things that you feel like you could do better. But it doesn't need to be delivered the Cam way all the time. Trusting other people's advice. So releasing certain things and saying, all right, cool, you're the expert. I'm going to trust you. So that's what it's looked like from a back office way. You mentioned kind of reframing our board, rebuilding our board, hiring our grant writers, fundraising experts, social media experts, things like that, to where we're just taking a little bit off of our plate and focusing on what we're good at. And also just being out in the community, building relationships, showing a presence. So we have some pretty exciting programs coming up, and just looking for ways to replicate that and things that we've done in the past.
So what is the future of True Change look like? What's the vision for 5 years, 10 years, next year? What are you thinking?
It's a very philosophical question. So, like I said, primarily we partner with local governments, other nonprofits, and educational institutions. And the main goal is to help students align their actions with their bigger picture goals. And when it comes with that, a lot of times people are focused on their careers or focused on money. And part of my story is that's all I was focused on, and I neglected everything in the middle. So teaching them, all right, this is what your goal is. How can we get there, and keep your sanity along the way? And it's figuring out the right way to partner with all these different people who want to help, but may not have the infrastructure. So for example, worked on a couple of projects with local governments to where they want to build a pipeline of workers.
All right, Cam. So I really love having this conversation with you, and I really appreciate your time. Can you let everybody know how they can get in touch with you, how they can follow you, and how they can work with you guys?
For sure. So I'm gonna give you two different ways. One is through the nonprofit side. So the nonprofit is called True Change, and it is www.maketruechange.org. And it's also that for all social media. And then personally, like I said, Reade told me to go ahead and get my name. So just Cameron Phillips with a K .com, and then at it's Cam Phillips on all social media.
All right, guys, make sure to get in touch with Cam. Make sure to follow him, and make sure to like and subscribe to the Grow Rogue podcast. And we'll see you all on the next one. Thanks.